Imagine you turn 18, and in that same month, you get your first credit card offer in the mail. You sign your first apartment lease, and you have to figure out how much of your paycheck should go towards taxes, savings, and rent. Now imagine that no one ever taught you how any of this works. For a lot of us, that's not a hypothetical. That's just a Tuesday. Quick, honest question. How many of you actually feel confident explaining what an APR is or how a credit score is calculated? If you're one of those people raising your hand, you're in very good company. And today, I want to talk about why that shouldn't be normal anymore. Here's the good news. Personal finance education is finally gaining a real momentum nationwide. As of 2026, 39 states now require some form of personal finance coursework to graduate high school. That's up from just 8 states back in 2020. In a few short years, that's a huge shift, and honestly, it's proof that this issue has finally started getting the attention it deserves. But here's the catch. Some form is doing a lot of work in that sentence. 13 of those 39 states just tuck a few finance lessons into an existing class, a couple of weeks buried inside a math or social studies unit, instead of requiring a real standalone class, and access is still widely uneven from school to school and from state to state. Think about it this way. Almost everyone listening right now is going to sign a lease, take out a loan, open a credit card, or file taxes within the next few years, whether or not anyone ever actually taught us how to do it. My argument. That's why I believe every high school should be required to offer a standalone personal finance course. Financial illiteracy carries real, measurable costs for young people. Personal finance education produces proven improvements in financial behavior, and a nationwide requirement is the only way to guarantee that every student, not just students in certain states or certain zip codes, get equal access to these skills. So here's where we're headed. First, why financial illiteracy is a real costly problem for teens and young adults. Second, the proven benefits of requiring personal finance education. And third, why a nationwide requirement is the only way to close the access gap. Let's start with our first point. Why financial illiteracy is a real costly problem for teens and young adults. Let's start with what teens are already telling us about themselves. According to international testing data from the Nationwide Endowment for Financial Education, 1 in 5 U.S. teens lack basic financial literacy skills. And according to annuity.org, roughly 75% of teens say they lack confidence in their own personal finance knowledge. Nearly half don't even know the difference between a credit card and a debit card. Pause on that for a second. That's a knock on us. That's a knock on a system that hands us a diploma but never hands us a budget. And that gap does not just disappear the way whenever we walk across the graduation stage. It turns into real financial costs. Think about how this shows up in adult life. It's the credit card debt that piles up because nobody ever explained how compound interest actually works against you. It's a scholarship or financial aid package that gets missed because the paperwork felt like a foreign language. It's a 21-year-old who signs a car loan at a 24% interest rate because nobody ever taught them what a good rate even looks like. It's a friend of yours, maybe even someone in this very room, who ends up paying hundreds of dollars in overdraft fees in a single year. One small mistake at a time, simply because no one ever sat them down and explained how a checking account actually works. I see this in my own job daily. I work as a teller at a credit union, and I see a lot of young people come in having overdraft fees or delinquent accounts because they get credit cards or loans that they can't pay for. Researchers have found that a direct link between financial literacy and financial success come later in life. This isn't a minor inconvenience. It's a pattern that can follow someone for years, sometimes decades, quietly shaping every major decision they make with their money. These gaps aren't just uncomfortable, they're expensive. But here's the good news. Schools that actually require personal finance education have already proven that this is fixable. Proven benefits. Now we'll talk about the proven benefits of requiring personal finance education. A Federal Reserve study looked at states that mandated financial education and found something powerful. Students in those states grew up to have higher credit scores and lower rates of credit delinquency as young adults. So what does better credit actually mean in real life? It means a lower interest rate on your first car loan. It means that getting approved for an apartment without needing a cosigner. It means avoiding the predatory, high-interest debt that traps so many young adults before they've even had a chance to build anything for themselves. The $100,000 number. This benefit isn't just something you can feel, it's something you can measure. A 2024 report found that completing just one semester-long personal finance course produces a lifetime financial benefit of roughly $100,000 per student. Now, say that number out loud in your head again. One class, one semester, $100,000 over a single person's lifetime. And that number isn't just helping one person. It compounds across a family, a community, for generations. If the benefits are this clear, you would expect every school to already be doing this. But they aren't, and that is exactly the problem. 3. Why a nationwide requirement is the only way to close the access gap. Right now, access depends a lot on where you happen to go to school. Schools with higher rates of low-income students are far less likely to guarantee a personal finance course than wealthier schools. That turns financial literacy into a privilege instead of a basic life skill. Something that you get if you're lucky enough to grow up in the right zip code, not something every single student can afford. Voluntary or embedded approaches consistently fall short. When personal finance is only squeezed into a few weeks of another class, a lot of schools skip it entirely or teach it so inconsistently that it barely counts for anything. A real, required standalone course is what actually moves the needle, not an optional add-on that's the first thing cut when time runs short. And honestly, we already do this for other life skills. Physical education and health class are all mandatory because they prepare us for adult life. Managing money deserves the same treatment. Nobody argues that health class is optional because some parents could teach it at home. We shouldn't argue that about money either. Now, I know this isn't a totally uncontested idea, so let's address some arguments that people bring up most. First argument is pushback from schools because they simply can't afford it or have enough trained teachers to pull it off. And that's a fair concern. Experts estimate that the country would need roughly 23,000 additional trained educators to properly teach personal finance in every state that currently requires it. That's a real logistical challenge, but it is not a reason to give up on the goal. Free teacher training resources already exist through nonprofits and state economic education councils, so schools don't have to build this from scratch. And remember that $100,000 lifetime return per student. Schools already have funded programs like sports facilities, clubs, and assemblies, with a much smaller payoff than that. If we can find the budget for those, then we can find the budget for this class. Another opposing view is about the research being mixed. And this is very true. An older Harvard Business School study found that some early states' mandates had little measurable effect on students' credit outcomes. But more recent research clears this up, because the difference comes down to how the course is taught. Semester-long standalone courses show real, lasting improvements in credit scores well into adulthood. Short lessons, tacked onto another class, show little to no effect at all. The lesson here isn't that personal financial education doesn't work, it's that we need to do it right or not bother doing it at all. So let's bring this all together. Financial illiteracy has real costly consequences for young people. Requiring personal finance education produces proven, measurable benefits, and only a nationwide requirement can guarantee that every student gets equal access no matter their zip code. Every high school should be required to offer a standalone personal finance course because this is a life skill every one of us will need, and no student should be left to figure it out all alone just because they go to school in a different area. So think back to that 18-year-old standing there with a credit card offer in one hand and an apartment lease in the other. One required class in high school is the difference between that moment feeling like a trap and that moment feeling like the first confident step into a future they are actually prepared for. That is the difference one required class can make. Not a perfect solution to every financial problem we'll ever face, but a real chance for every student, no matter where they happen to sit in a classroom. Thank you.